dear Rector of the University of Luxembourg, dear Mrs. Viviane Reding, President of the Foundation of European Merit, dear Shiva Dostar, Head of the Institute of the EIB, dear members of the family of Pierre Werner, ladies and gentlemen, dear distinguished guests, Professor Patrizia NANZ, President of EUI Florence, and Professor Marie-Hélène JOBIN, Vice-Rector of the University of Luxembourg. On behalf of the organizer of the conference of this evening, the Bridge Forum Dialogue, in cooperation with the University of Luxembourg, the Center Europe Direct at the University of Luxembourg, and the EUI Florence, I would like to welcome the in-person audience and also the online audience for this conference entitled What Role for European Higher Education in the Changing World. This conference will be live streamed thanks to the Media Center of the University of Luxembourg. Also, a picture will be taken during the conference, and the recording will be subsequently published on the website of the University of Luxembourg, in the Library of European Studies, and by Bridge Forum Dialogue. The conference of this evening will be structured in the following moments. Opening remarks by Professor Marie-Hélène JOBIN, then the keynote by Professor Patrizia NANZ, followed by a Q&A session with the audience. And at the end, after the concluding remarks, it will be a cocktail organized by Bridge Forum Dialogue. Before diving in the heart of the matter, I would like to say a few words about our distinguished keynote speaker. Professor Patrizia NANZ has been president of the European University Institute since March 2024. She combines a distinguished scientific record with proven leadership experience, having served as director of the Institute for Sustainability in Potsdam and funding director of the Franco-German Forum for the Future. Her expertise spans a broad spectrum of themes, with a particular focus on such topical issues as the future of European democracy, public participation, innovative public administration, and the socio-economic transformation linked to climate change. Professor NANZ has served as Vice President of Germany's Federal Office for the Safety of Nuclear Waste Management and head of the Collaborative Governance Lab. She has advised regional and national governments, as well as the European Commission, and built an extensive network in both the academic and political domains. Professor NANZ studied philosophy at the Munich School for Philosophy and History and literary studies, as well as philosophy at universities in Munich, Milan, Montreal, and Frankfurt, Rhine-Main. She also trained as a journalist and worked as an editor for Fischer Verlag Frankfurt and Feltrinelli Editore Milan. Now, our Vice-Rector, Professor Marie-Hélène JOBIN, is in this position as Vice-Rector for Partnership and International Relations at the University of Luxembourg since 2023. Here, she oversees the development and promotion of the university's impact on Luxembourg society and economy, as well as on European society more broadly. She supports the initiation and strengthening of public and private partnership, the development of academic chairs, the valorization of intellectual property, and the university expertise through partnership, collaboration, or intellectual property licensing, as well as support for entrepreneurship, incubation, and acceleration of startups and spin-offs originating from the University of Luxembourg. Without delay, Professor Jobin, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena, for this kind introduction. I won't repeat all the prestigious guests that we have today. Thank you very much for being here, all of you. I would like, of course, to highlight the presence of Mrs. Reding, as well as Mrs. Dusta. And of course, we're really lucky today to have the presence also of the family Werner. Thank you very much for being here. And our guest of honor, Mrs. Patrizia NANZ. Professor NANZ, it's a real pleasure to have you with us today. I feel like privileged and very honored to address all of you today, and especially in this time where we have a lot of challenges that you know, where society is and the science is going under a big pressure. And as your role of science, as you study science in society and the responsibilities of university, I think that we will learn a lot from you today. As you know, we gather in a moment that is not so pleasant right now. We have witnesses witnesses in the last years, a lot of things in Europe that are not so interesting. War is there. The rule of law is being contested in many countries around the world. The borders have been reintroduced in some countries in Europe. And the notion of truth that is really central to academia is really challenged daily with disinformation and institutional distrust. Universities are, of course, affected by those dynamics. But I believe also that we have some strength and also some unique strength that we can use to respond to those threats. And I'm happy with Professor NANZ to explore a few of them today. As Professor NANZ will go through her speech, I know that she has had to do a lot of research on this. She will talk about the different roles of the university, especially the preservation and transmission of knowledge, and also the capacity to innovate and fuel progress with research. But also, she will talk certainly about the third mission that I'm really fond of, because I have this responsibility at the university to foster a good environment to broaden our capacity in this area. So impact on society is something also that I think that you will cover. What I would like to do with you today in the preparation of the keynote speech of Professor NANZ is to talk about scientific diplomacy. Scientific diplomacy is built on the idea that science in higher education is not only a tool for discovery, it is also an instrument of cooperation and of peace. When we think about diplomacy, we often think about ministries, treaties, or embassy, but today diplomacy extends also to different and non-formal areas. It may include the culture, of course, ONG's work, tourism, and indeed universities. Universities are often among the few institutions that will maintain relationship across divides, and when other channels are blocked, we still have some contacts with foreign countries. As Nobel Prize Ahmed Zewel wisely said, the soft power of science has the potential to reshape global diplomacy. This insight is more relevant than ever today. Without treaties and agreements, researchers are co-authoring papers, mentoring students, and attending conferences with colleagues from all over the world, even in time of crisis. Scientific diplomacy is operating at 3 levels. The first level, we already know it, it's when we have agreement state to state for funding or for collaboration. Can think about Erasmus Plus or Horizon Europe or other bilateral or multilateral agreements that we have to foster research and cooperation. The second level is the level of the institution. So we can have bilateral or multilateral funding scheme between two universities and institutes and research environment. Such agreements are often showcased and involve often also official signing with politics and diplomatics attending. So we can also play a role when we are doing some agreements between two establishments. And the third level, it's what we call the individual connections between professors, doctoral students, and researchers. And those ties are very grounded in mutual respect and intellectual trust. It is what will sustain whenever there is no more relationship between two countries. Those relationships will continue over and over, and we must cherish those relationships. In time of conflicts, maintaining these informal channels become even more essential. Scientific diplomacy is people-to-people diplomacy. It helps preserve dialogue, trust, and hope of reconciliation. However, we must not be naive. Scientific diplomacy is not always benign. Universities are becoming political instruments and could align with authoritarian regimes. The real question that we have to ask: how do we support researchers who may have different point of view from their own state? At the University of Luxembourg, we regularly face the visa denials that affects our ability to welcome speakers in conference and attract also talents, PhD or postdoctoral students, for instance. Those restrictions reflect legitimate security concerns, but they also challenge our commitment to openness. We do support the state's role in ensuring national security, but as a university, we also uphold our core values: openness, academic freedom, and international collaboration. University of Luxembourg is ranked among the most international universities in the world, with students and staff coming from 140 different countries. The diversity is not incidental, it's intentional. Indeed, scientific diplomacy is not limited to international projects or treaties or agreements between two establishments or two states. Scientific diplomacy. Our students and staff, the diversity is a reality, a daily reality. It's not just a tagline. It shapes also how students encounter complexity and cooperation among them. We should educate not just experts, but global citizens, people capable of critical thinking and carrying values like peace, reason, and cooperation in the world. In this perspective, I am pleased to highlight our recent inclusion in the Guild of European Research-Intensive Universities. This selective alliance brings together some of Europe's most respected research institutions, from King's College London to Bologna University. And what is interesting, it provides also a strong voice to Europe for our policies in higher education. Joining the Guild is a recognition of our academic maturity. More importantly, it's a commitment that we took. We want to collaborate to shape Europe's scientific future, defend academic freedom, and enhance universities' role as a diplomatic actor. Just let me share an example. The Guild cooperation with African universities provide an alternative to growing authoritarian influence in Africa, when Western engagement is declining right now. Not all threats, as you know, come from authoritarian regimes. Even in dynamic contexts, such as the Trump administration's attack on Harvard, academic institutions can be destabilized. I'm sure that Professor NANZ could provide a more substantial view on this. We are witnessing also a growing number of displaced scholars, academics in exile or unable to travel due to sanctions. Many of them reject the views of their own government. Some have fled, some others resist from inside. We must find a way to make space for them because their contribution and their courage enrich us all. Universities can be viewed as embassy of knowledge and safe harbor for scholars. We must also recognize the diplomatic access universities can have. In my career, just to give an example, I have several occasions of meeting with ministers, ambassadors, and delegations from all around the world. These interactions are part of the soft diplomacy. They are opportunities for relationship building, agenda setting, and dialogue. Of course, when universities are invited at the table, it's because we are bringing value. But we can also bring values with us, academic freedom and scientific integrity. However, the geopolitical context is a stress test right now for universities. We must acknowledge the higher education institutions are vulnerable in this context. Uncertainty and geopolitical tensions can destroy long-lasting relationships and fruitful partnerships in a wink. We can witness it in the situation that is unfolding right now in the United States. On the other hand, we are essential in those times of tensions because our mission is, as I said earlier, to preserve and share advanced knowledge and to educate leaders of tomorrow and to inform also the broader public in a public debate. We must embrace our role as bridges across culture and across borders. And in a time when formal diplomacy is damaged, these informal scientific ties may be the last bridge left standing. By supporting these, we are not only advancing science, we are keeping hope alive. I am really looking forward for your speech and inspiring vision, Professor NANZ, that we will present in a few minutes. Thank you, all of us, for being here, and especially to you for traveling and having this discussion with us. Thank you to all.
Bonsoir, guten Abend, good evening. Thank you very much for this kind introduction and also for this wonderful invitation to speak here in Luxembourg before such a distinguished audience. Professor Jens Kreisel, Rector of the University of Luxembourg, Ms. Viviane Reding, President of the Fondation du Mérite Européen, Mr. Etienne Delauneux, Chair of the Bridge Forum Dialogue, Executive Committee, Ms. Shiva Dastar, Head of the European Investment Bank's Institutes, Pierre Werner's family members, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would also like to thank very much the organizer of this conference, namely the Bridge Forum Dialogue and Europe Direct of the University of Luxembourg, public history project co-funded by the European Union, and especially to Elena Nescu, without which nothing would have happened today. It's a particular honor to address you in the city that has become such a vital EU hub for institutional development and international finance. Let me start with some numbers that I'm sure resonate in this room. 109 billion euros in France for artificial intelligence, $138 billion in China, 200 billion euros in the EU, 500 billion in the US. Who can top that? Who is ahead? Are we falling behind? How can we fast-track the rise of European AI champions? These are the questions dominating policy discussions in every European capital right now, in every boardroom, in every institutional corridor. But wait a moment. Let us not forget that AI comes with its fair share of threats. Just think about the immense energy required to cool data centers, about how amortization challenges the worlds of work and art, and more broadly, the loss of know-how, or the concerns AI raises in terms of misinformation and security. What level of risk are we willing to tolerate? What regulations can help face it? I think we are at the edge of an abyss, involving both climate and geopolitics, and perhaps the future of humanity. Dario Draghi, summed it up well in his report on European competitiveness. I quote, "All the fundamental values on which Europe was built seem to be under threat. Prosperity, equity, freedom, and democracy. The foundations on which we are built are now being shaken." End quote. In the face of these looming circumstances, Mario Draghi revealed the solution he was asked to provide: more competitiveness driven by technological innovation. This solution has been transformed into the competitiveness compass, which now guides the European Commission's work program. But competitiveness for what exactly? And innovation in which direction? Europe finds itself caught in a reactive spiral. Political debate fragments into daily sound bites and tactical battles that are far removed from the everyday lives of the people. The sheer volume of information about technological disruption, environmental collapse, democratic backsliding, social injustice, trade wars, real wars, overwhelm our collective ability to process and integrate these challenges into coherent understanding. We are drowning in data, yet starving of wisdom. We need a big picture on how environmental, social, political, and security risks are entangled, and find out where our blind spots lie. The complex choices ahead deserve an honest debate about acceptable and also unacceptable trade-offs. My message today is that in these troubled times, universities stand as essential pillars of Europe's renewal. Renewal with the social sciences and humanities at the heart of this effort, working in collaboration with all other academic fields, as well as change makers across society. Yet the very institutions that can help us navigate the current challenges are themselves under attack. We just heard it. This is not just a crisis of higher education. It is a crisis of how we understand knowledge, innovation, and our collective future. Last October, I gave my inaugural lecture at the EY, where I was already speaking about the attacks against universities. In less than a year, these have clearly accelerated and revealed systematic planning. Following the lead of its counterparts in Hungary, India, and Argentina, the US government has subjected some of the world's most prestigious universities to sustained financial, legal, and political attacks. Assaults whose impact is global, given the reach of these institutions. But do not be too quick to dismiss these actions as the mere deviations of illiberal regimes. Across the world, and yet close to us, efforts to bring universities to heal are gaining momentum. What once took the form of budgetary pressures on institutions respected for their independence is now intensifying. Funding is being slashed, academics are being dismissed or even taken to court in attempts to silence those who fully exercise their academic freedom. It would be short-sighted of us to see the current crisis of the university exclusively in terms of rising authoritarianism or culture wars. There is a longer history to these attacks. It is more productive to see them as the most radical and extreme expression of a challenge to the autonomy of universities that has been going on for decades. Beyond the smokescreen of the culture wars, for today's most violent critics of higher education, the problem is not so much critical race theory or woke culture, but the very existence of institutions that are not fully pliable to the demands of economic value production and the expectations of those in power. With the successive oil shocks in the 70s and the efforts to compensate for the crisis of productivity included also technological innovations, not unlike today's European Commission's current orientation, to which I will return later. In this new configuration, universities became more central than ever in the circuits of economic production. In 2002, the World Bank report on higher education entitled Constructive Knowledge Societies confirmed the trend that has been identified by thinkers over the previous 20 years and clearly articulate in the Lisbon strategy. Knowledge, I'm quoting, the report says, has become the most important factor in economic development. And universities are crucial sites for the mobilization of productive assets and human capital. But how is knowledge best mobilized? To enable universities to respond quickly to changing labor markets and to adapt rapidly to technological change, the report called for more flexible arrangements for academic staff and the evaluation of their performance. This includes moving away from civil service system for universities. What is striking about this kind of literature is how it illuminates the practical implication of metaphors such as the knowledge economy. For if you take it seriously, the idea that knowledge is an economic resource, then its value is best determined by market mechanisms. That is indeed called the marketplace of ideas. And in order for this marketplace to operate efficiently, you need to remove rigidities such as tenure and the system of disciplines, since they do not appear to be productive to technological breakthroughs. Yet, it would be naive to imagine that these dramatic changes in the organization of the academic workforce do not have consequences for the kind of knowledge that is produced. Knowledge is not a substance quantifiable as information that can be produced more or less efficiently without changing its nature. How we produce knowledge shapes the kind of knowledge we produce. Let me give you a couple of examples to illuminate what we risk losing. Most of you will be familiar with the book that has become the cornerstone of Holocaust studies. Raoul Hilberg's Destruction of the European Jews. When published in 1985, this book has been the first attempt as a comprehensive study of the Shoah. It was also the result of a long and lonely work, more than 30 years in the making. Hilberg had started his work in 1948, at a time when there was widespread reluctance to deal with the subject. The advice he received was to stay away from this topic. Academics were uninterested, publishers annoyed, and yet he persisted for decades. In his foreword, Hilberg is candid about what made this book possible. Tenure at a public university, which gave him, I quote, the support that only an academic institutions can provide, unquote. Stable employment, sabbaticals, and occasional research funds. No one would question that this book is important, not only as great scholarship in its field, but more broadly for European history and for the self-understanding of European societies. Surely, this is not the sort of thing a university should be doing. This is the sort of thing a university should be doing, and unfortunately, thinking about genocide has not become any less relevant. But would such a book be possible in the current ecosystem of academic knowledge? The answer is a resound no. What kind of call would support such a project that began when the topic was deemed irrelevant? What funding scheme would accept a bet on an enterprise that could have failed many times over? When Hilberg started in 1948, could he have distilled his vision into a list of deliverables or work packages? I don't think so. Let me give you another example closer to me. My first PhD supervisor and mentor, Jürgen Habermas, once told me that he could never have succeeded in today's universities. He never applied for a research grant in his life, but wrote 20 books. In between his book, Between Facts and Norms, he presents a deliberative theory of law and democracy that goes beyond the liberal tradition. This book of more than 600 pages influenced the 2001 White Paper on European Governance, one of the first attempts to involve citizens in EU politics more than any policy paper, Jérôme Vignon told me, who was at the head of this white paper. We have to ask ourselves whether something has been lost in the transformation of universities. If we try to measure and control every aspect of knowledge production, we risk losing the ability to engage meaningfully with the world around us. What once was the cultural project of modernity, the drive to make the world entirely available to us, may now cause the world to slip through our fingers. It would indeed be a huge loss if universities ceased to be a space for the free exercise of intelligence, free in the sense of not being entirely subject to a logic of immediate and measurable utility. A space that allows society to reflect on itself, a critical space. Let me illustrate this by coming back to innovation. We are constantly told that innovation is the solution to our problems, but what exactly is innovation? At its core, it is just a label we put on an artifact or practice to mark it as new. Look at the history of patents. Their main purpose was not some grand vision of progress. It was simply to give inventors a reason to keep going, to make a living from their creations. But plenty of innovations have slipped through the radar at first. Unexpected breakthroughs, overlooked ideas, bets that failed, or only paid off much later. The story of when rechargeable batteries were first used commercially illustrates this perfectly. In 1859, physicist Gaston Planté created an early version of the lead-acid battery. Later, chemist Camille Alphonse Faure improved its design, but the battery still had serious problems. It often caused short circuits. At that time, even Thomas Edison called the storage battery a scam. Yet, Henri Tudor, a young Luxembourger interested in electricity, took on the challenge while studying engineering. Together with his brother and cousin, he developed a better version of the battery using especially made parts, which allowed him to power his parents' house with electric lights, the first private residence in Luxembourg to have them. Not long after, Tudor's batteries were being sold throughout Europe. Take Google for a more recent example. Like so many other big tech giants, the technology that make it famous, its search engine, was not the product of a lone genius. It built on the work of nearly 30 researchers, drawing from fields as diverse as mathematical sociology and library science, benefiting from US National Science Foundation funding at Stanford University. In fact, none of the major technological achievements of recent decades would have been possible without the massive investment in the intellectual commons of universities that characterized the post-war decades. From the internet to the voice-activated Siri, from GPS to the touchscreen display, the technology found in the iPod, iPhone, and iPad are often overlooked and ignored achievements of the research efforts and funding supports of governments and military. Contrary to myth, industry benefits from the financial risks taken by governments. As Abraham Flexner, founding director of Princeton's Institute for Advanced Study, famously showed in his 1939 essay, it's a very nice title, I think, The Usefulness of Useless Knowledge. Asking deep questions motivated by curiosity and without concern for application often leads not only to important scientific discoveries, but also to the most revolutionary technological breakthrough. In short, without it, no quantum mechanics, no computer chips. And these examples contradict the idea of an unidirectional flow of innovation from laboratory to market, and reminds us that innovation is not just a clever technique. It is shaped by how it is actually used, often in ways no one predicted. But here's another big question we need to ask. What do we actually expect from innovation? Innovation is often equated with progress. And yes, it has potential to drive positive change. But we need to stay clear-eyed about the risks, especially when change moves faster than the capacity societies to keep up with. Joseph Schumpeter never assumed that innovation automatically led to progress. As he said, creative destruction was not just about breakthroughs. It also came with painful social costs, such as job losses or recessions. AI is a case in point. While championed as driver of growth, it raises complex and serious concerns. Mass job displacement could exacerbate inequalities and fuel social instability. Its immense energy demands directly contradicts the European Union's commitments under the Green Deal. But above all, generative AI is fundamentally transforming the way we create, learn, and relate to truth. It enables sophisticated disinformation and, combined with social media, reshapes how we access information, posing a direct threat to the very foundations of democracy. In education, its growing and rather low reflexive use risks fostering dependency, undermining young people's problem-solving abilities, independent thinking, and authentic self-expression. The direction towards which innovation leads us as society is fundamentally political. We can hardly say that new technologies are in short supply. What we are lacking is the ability to make sense of its constant flux of innovation and the political choices to give it a clear direction. This is where universities become essential, not merely as talent pools or incubator of good ideas, but as anchors for transformative change. Universities provide the critical space for informed deliberation that must precede and accompany any innovation policy to give it reasoned direction. Universities ensure that innovations are aligned with society's real needs, that their adoption is thoughtful and responsible, and that they deliver meaningful impacts. Universities play a vital role in guiding innovation. They help shape direction through research and cross-sector dialogue. Not by offering all the answers, but by creating spaces where science, policy, and society can interact. Universities also contribute to shaping regulations. While innovation often challenges existing legal systems, academic work, especially in law and governments, can be the trigger to new frameworks. At the same time, looking at past debates with history in mind, we can help avoid the mistaken idea that less regulation always leads to more innovation. Universities are also significant in the evaluation of new technologies. Innovators usually present these technologies as inherently positive game changers. But rather than moralizing the debate by labeling innovations as simply good or bad, the real task is to understand their actual effects, going beyond standard impact assessment. Universities also study how innovations are adopted and implemented. Research fields like the anthropology of technology show how closely linked social and technological dimensions are, how humans and technology shape each other. Finally, academia helps preserve memory in areas like the nuclear sector, where I had a couple of years of experience. Losing experience over time can create major vulnerabilities. To enable informed long-term management of technologies and prevent skills gap is essential to ensure knowledge transmission, an imperative at the heart of archival science core purpose. And the members of the prominent public history department at the University of Luxembourg knows this very well. Of course, universities are responsible for training innovators, regulators, evaluators, and guardians of our collective memory. But if we reduce their role to merely providing skills, as the competitive compass does, we risk losing sight of the bigger question. Why? To what end? Many reactions to the new EU scientific strategy, and before that to Mario Draghi's report, rightly pointed out the near absence of social sciences and humanities. But setting up a false opposition between social science and humanities and science and technology would be a huge mistake, because we need universities as a whole, as broad, all-encompassing institutions covering all fields of human activity. This goes far beyond strategic foresight. It is not a matter of projecting past or present trajectories into the future and assessing their consequences. It is about exercising our imagination beyond what exists and remaining open to alternative futures. At a time when higher education systems are facing increasing nationalist, anti-intellectual, anti-scientific pressures, we must stand together and continue renewing the legacy of universities by forging and nurturing true alliances. This means emphasizing complementarity over competition between specialized fields. It means going beyond simple academic exchange to set shared objectives. It means making transfer between disciplines a central pillar of collaboration, fostering genuine engagement with differences. And it means building partnerships that remain responsive to real-world challenges instead of becoming detached routines. This requires investing in stronger sense-making capacities across society and forging innovation-driven alliances. Technical, but also social innovation-driven alliances that bridges research with change makers in society. Finance and philanthropy have a pivotal role to play in shaping these transformative pathways. They are uniquely positioned to unlock new forms of creativity and long-term thinking that universities alone cannot fully activate. By cultivating such partnerships, we can better align academic reflexivity with the public good and ensure that higher education serves not only as a space for critical inquiry, but also as a driver of prosperous futures. At a time when we are bombarded with data, the need to meaningfully interpret information is more pressing than ever. Of course, reflexivity is not only exclusive to academia, but universities have provided and should continue to provide an environment conducive to critical reflection. By generating meaning, universities shape how we see the world, how we make sense of it, and ultimately how we act in it. Universities are involved in what Hannah Arendt calls the political. They contribute to define the terms by which we live together. They participate in the construction of the world we share. Universities do that as communities. They exist through relationships between people, professors, students, staff, before they exist through buildings and campuses. And I've seen the beautiful campus of the University of Luxembourg today. The existence of these communities depend on a certain degree of closure. Not everyone is free to join, but also on indispensable openness to other university communities, to local surroundings, to publics, and to external political and economic powers. University communities maintain a variety of relationships with their environment, including education, training, fieldwork, action research, publishing activities, communication, convening, that's very important, public debates, economic transactions, employment, real estate, and partnerships. All these relationships, which anchor universities and underpin their reflexivities, are anything but one-directional. Consider the case of finance. While universities contribute with training and foundational research that shapes theoretical and applied understandings of markets, risks, and value, their role does not end with academic inquiry. They can also serve as catalytic actors in purpose-driven finance, for example, by co-developing rigorous evaluation frameworks for impact investment. They also act as ecosystem orchestrators, drawing on their unique and very credible position as connectors of students, faculty, alumni, local businesses, community organizations, and they serve as regional and trans-regional living laboratories for transformation, as illustrated by campus sustainability initiatives. Universities have always operated this way, combining convening power, long-term thinking, public trust, and a commitment to shared purpose. Today, we must ensure that the conditions are in place to safeguard them and allow them to flourish as vibrant, engaged communities. So the question is, what are these conditions? First, academic freedom. The license to choose the question asked and to debate about the possible answers. Okay. Second, a safe space. We heard about this. A space to engage with different points of view. This is more important than ever, because in a polarized world, if you're not able to have a space within which we can debate within a university, we're not able to debate outside and with people who will attack the freedom of universities. So let me underline this. Universities provide a safe space, but in the sense that it's a space where one can be safely unsettled. A safe space only makes sense if it allows us to move out of our comfort zone, welcoming other points of views in its many dimensions from a position of humility. So we are not here to confirm social currency or identities, conventions or trends. We are here to reflect on them. So no offense to brilliant inventors or savvy industrialists, but another industrial revolution is not what we need. We do not need a new steam engine that, in the hands of the powerful, will drive resources and labor extraction even further. What we truly need is a new renaissance. And I'm not saying this because the UI is based in Florence. Yet the city's history reminds us of what is possible when institutions nurture both rigorous inquiry and bold imagination. I think this is what we are lacking most, political and social imagination of alternative future. And I think that part of the social and sciences and humanities are responsible for this lack of imagination we are currently in. So we need universities to hold the space for the tough discussions that Europe's future desperately needs. We desperately need discussion and debates about what would be a self-determined future and what it means to be sovereign, what it means to have food sovereignty, what it means to have energy sovereignty, and many more. We need to gather scholars in order to do this, willing to embrace the intellectual risks of synthesis and big picture thinking. Not many scholars are able to do that and willing. We need politicians ready to resist the pressure of constant reaction and engage in fundamental reflection on European purposes. And we need civic innovators, be it non-profit organizations or the private sectors, prepared to look beyond immediate goals and embrace different metrics of success. We have all the world's knowledge at our fingertips, but what we need more than ever is strategic clarity about European purposes and direction, so that tactical responses serve longer-term goals. We need Europe's big picture, and when politics seems to have abandoned its ambition to think about the future in transformative terms, universities can be the breeding ground of our capacity of social and political imagination. The stakes could not be higher. If we lose universities as spaces for free inquiry and critical reflection, we lose one of our most important resources for navigating an uncertain future. But if we can defend and renew their mission as spaces where the hard questions can be asked, not just how to innovate, but why and for whom, they can help us build not only a more competitive Europe, but also a more just and sustainable one. Thank you.
Is it okay? Yes. Thank you very much, Professor NANZ. It was very enlightening. I learned a lot, and I really appreciate how you put forward also the idea of purpose. We often lose it, even if we are within the university. It was really interesting. I would like now to open the floor to questions. Is there some volunteers? Etienne?
Thank you very much, distinguished ladies, for your really remarkable presentations. 20 years ago, precisely, the Brit Forum Dialogue organized here in Luxembourg a conference on the subject higher education in Europe. The central question posed at the time to the speakers were, can we be equal and excellent too? The views expressed by the academy seeming to be shared by many participants converge to consider that both equality and equity on the one hand and excellence on the other can be seen as complementary. Basically, in that perspective, it belongs to the university in cooperation with the authority to find an adequate balance in such a sensible trade-off. I did not heard a reference to this specific dilemma, but many elements may be close to it. Thank you. That's the question.
Would you like to answer right away? Yes.
Should I take this? You have one? No. Thank you very much for this question. I think it's a question which is for a long time has been on the table, namely the idea that from the 70s onwards we had mass universities, and the idea was to educate as many people as possible, thereby losing excellence. No? This is the question. Would you phrase it differently? You seem to have another, you can have a question later on. So, in my view, 20 years back, we had a very different circumstances than we have today. That would be my first point. I mean, there are different purposes for educating people. One is to have a productive society, to have a free society, to have democracy, and so we need people to be educated in order to take part in civic life, and also to have good jobs. So it was also an idea to be productive, right? This would be my first point. I don't think there is a sort of self-evident juxtaposition between equality on the one hand and excellence, and I would question the term of excellence, in fact. First of all, I think today we have to make sense also of the relevance of research, because purely speaking about excellence also risks to bring science, in particular social science and humanities, in an ivory tower, detached from the real world challenges, which I don't think is only a good thing. Excellence is an overstretched term. This would be my first point. The second point, as I said at the beginning, I think today, given the technology we'll face in the next years, and I'm not an engineer by any means, but what people tell is that the next 3 to 5 years will determine the level of impact on social life of artificial intelligence. Social life meaning education, but in particular decision-making, democracy, legal systems, everything. It's already used by the Commission for doing policies. It's already used by many governments. So I think that the level of change is already noticeable, but at one point in time, there may be a tipping point. Again, this is not based on my own research, but what I hear and listen and read in the literature. I do believe that today, in order to continue to have a free society and a democratic society, we need to educate people to have critical thinking and big picture thinking. Because otherwise we lose the independence of individuals, which is sort of the backbone of any kind of free society. So I'm afraid to say that I think that the education today has also quite different purposes than 20 years ago.
Thank you very much. You have another question? Yes, Shiva.
Thank you very much, Professor NANZ, for your very insightful reflections on innovation and universities. I was wondering how, about your views on how universities need to innovate themselves, also in order to support what I would call a bit more of a transformational innovation that we need in our society. Reading the Draghi report, it is very much built around neoliberalism and economic competitiveness. Mm-hmm. You know, we have a lot of indicators showing that we need to move beyond that as well. And in Europe in particular, we may have certain strength. So I'm just trying to see how can universities also innovate within themselves the curricula and help us to not just feel that we need to now catch up with the US-led or, you know, that sort of innovation, that competitiveness. What are your views on that?
Well, the expert of transformation of universities is next to you, I think. So I think we should hand over to how to transform universities. What I can say, how can I say? I had the mission of transforming several organizations to transform universities, the hardest one, because they are professors, and professors are free. They're not employees in a technical sense. They are, but in their mind they're not. So what my first answer to this would be that I'm in the middle of thinking about what academic freedom means. Does it mean that I can do whatever I want, or is it within the development of a certain university, a certain organization? It's not freedom from, it's freedom with a responsibility for something, right? So I think we should really reflect on what academic freedom means today. It's different probably than... The second is that what I would do, and what I'm going to do in October, is instead of continuously thinking about the role of university in transformation, I'll ask people in the ecosystem of my university, so from the private sector, from the social, civil society, etc., to ask what they need from university. Because universities have a social responsibility, even though they don't spell it out. And I would like to see what follows up from there. My last point would be towards the Draghi report. It's very tricky. The Draghi basically emulates the American way of doing things, right? There's nothing much European about it. Yeah? So this would be my first point. The second is that he basically says we need 3 transitions, technology transition, energy transition, and security and defense, right? So the 3. But the problem is that they're interlinked. And we have an overall transformation to manage, the transformation of society and industry, right? So it's clearly normative. So it's not as if there would be separate transformations. In order to reflect on that, we need the social sciences, and we need 3 kinds of knowledges. One is system knowledge, so the what, data. But not only data, making sense of data, right? So for example, on the climate, we have lots of knowledge, system knowledge, but we have a huge gap between knowledge and action, right? So system knowledge, there's plenty of. The second is orientation knowledge. This is what we're lacking today. Where do you want to go? And academia cannot do it on its own. It can only do it in dialogue with society, in dialogue with actors which are outside of society. Because of course they cannot be normatively at my desk as a philosopher say where we go, right? But they can be credible anchors and conveners of such debates. There's no other way of doing it. So second is orientation knowledge, and the third is transformation knowledge, how we get from A to B. And this is totally forgotten in the competitiveness report by Mario Draghi. So, and also, as you rightly said, we should really think and be much, I think that Europe in this very moment really lacks self-assurance, determinants, and we're totally reactive. So what would be a European direction to go? What would be a European way of life? What would be the European dream for our children and grandchildren? Why don't we spell that out? And why don't we come up with a sort of a quite bold, self-assured, first of all, analysis of the present times? I think we have very good conditions. We have talents, we have money, we have a quite stable political systems in many countries. And then, of course, think about the future. But in general, you cannot just do one thing and then the other thing, and A plus B plus C is not a vision of anything. So I think, and this is what citizens are lacking. They see that the budget of defense is rising and they say, yes, we want to be secure, but how is it in the whole picture of a European society? So I do believe that this would be certainly the duties also of academia to support this way of thinking.
Thank you. Can I go with one of my own questions? Is it possible? Luxembourg is a very compact country with a sole university, where there is just one university. And as a university, we have, of course, to answer to all the needs of the society for the country. But at the same time, it is important also to take a step back and make sure that we have this freedom, academic freedom. How do you see it? Because it's an acute problem or challenge in a country where there is just one university.
I think it's a problem we face in all universities. Whether you're one or many in one city, it doesn't change a lot. It's the question of how to get in touch with the lived experience of people. I think in the last decades, we have seen development which was lots of academic freedom and sort of retreat and distance from the rest of societies, as many other institutions as well, which is a problem when we now face attacks. And it's certainly not enough to say, you cannot attack us because we have academic freedom. I mean, the people who want to attack universities will laugh. We have to be much more bold about the values of university. And I don't see much thinking in Europe on this. And I would be very happy to have leaders of universities, but also beyond universities, thinking about this boldly. And also debates within university. I mean, what I see is lots of discussions under the carpet, people not engaging. We have polarization within university, but we don't have debates. We don't have the ability to hold the space for this. And if we're not able to hold the space for it within it and educate the people to go out of the university, being able to, debate on this, this will be, not very good for democratic societies. So back to your question. It's a very tricky thing. You want to be relevant, but you don't want to be a service provider. Exactly. Of course not, because you're independent. So my answer to this is that what I usually do is I speak with governments or societal actors, usually different sectors, and try to find out what the different perspective of a problem is, to have a clear mandate or a clear question to go. But then I never give them what they want first phase. I will never, ever subscribe any service, please give me some research on X, Y, Z. Because, it's an art to craft the questions. Governments don't know the questions. They ask me, because I was always in scientific advice for the last 15 years. But the problem is, do they know the questions? Do they pose the questions right? So they might ask questions, but then we have to work on the questions. So we give them what they want, but within what we give them what they want, we have independent fundamental research. So they want chocolate, we give them chocolate, but we give them the mancherie. So inside they will find the cherry, you see?
I like it. Yes, we have a question here. Mr.
Firstly, thanks to your profound speech, Ms. NANZ. You, for example, described universities as drivers of innovation and many more things, of course. But what I would like to know is, should universities take the leading role in the relationship with the state when it comes to innovation, or should universities rather work together with the state on an eye-to-eye basis?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, universities are independent, and what eye-to-eye means is not easy to answer. So I do believe that transformation cannot be done by just one sector. Certainly not by university itself, but certainly not by any other actor, but only together. And so in this kind of collaboration, universities as credible institutions can take the lead. They could lead transactionally across sectors. And you have to reverse, in my mind, the question of political advice or policy advice. Because the states ask universities to provide advice. Yeah? Often, how can I say, my experience in the German government is that they have 60 boards, 60 with each have at least 20 scientists. Ethical board and how can I say, the Weisen, the Wirtschaftsweisen and whatnot, right? They produce reports, 200 pages, 300 pages. They go into the drawer. These are highly paid scientists. And there are 60 of these groups working in separate for different ministers. And nothing happens, right? So they're hugely frustrated. And this is because the public administration, and this is why I went into the state to understand where is the bottleneck, why doesn't it work? It's because the state, at least in Germany, I can speak for one country, but perhaps also for France, because I work between Germany and France, that there is no mechanism of absorbing knowledge, because you have different responsibilities within different ministries, but the challenges are complex. So it's absolutely difficult to absorb any kind of knowledge. This is true for knowledge, but it's also true for public participation and any result out of citizen participation. So it's highly frustrating. So to my mind, I think at this point in time, if people in government are honest with themselves, they're under big pressure and they're not quite sure where they're going. And so I think they're now asking more and more for orientation. And I think we should then take this opportunity to create the space, if you want on eye level, right? But to be doing it on our own terms. And this is what I meant by leading. You create the space, you invite leaders of different sectors, but trying to steer the process correctly, trying to ask the right questions, etc. So you're not working on their terms because you are independent. But this is, I think, the way we would go.
I'll go with you. Sorry.
I never visited Qatar, but I had some research, and I know it's a country with many universities. So what models do you drive between Qatar and Luxembourg? So both are rich countries. One has only one university, you just mentioned, and the other one has so many, with the best branches, even from all over the world, like American, British universities, and etc. So what lessons do you drive between these two countries when it comes to collaboration between state and the business sector? So one element that I want to emphasize is that one country is with consolidated democracy, like Luxembourg, Grand Duchy, and the other one has a big lack of democracy, as everybody knows in this audience. Thank you.
Well, that's a very tough question because it doesn't only concern partnerships, it also concerns funding. What kind of funding do you want to allow for universities, right? Again, I think the question is to do it on our own terms. So it's not only a question of ethical committees, what I have in my university, because it's a very technocratic way to go. I think we should have sort of deeper intellectual conversations within universities with whom we want partnerships. And I believe that these partnerships have to be purpose-driven. If we don't share the same values, I would stay away from that. I don't know whether this is a clear answer.
Okay. If I can. So I will perhaps take, I will rather comment something, Patrizia, if you mind. I think there was a question of transformation. And I think that we've got one part of the answer to transformation in the room, and that's you. I think it's really your generation. It's up to you to take it up. And I just would like to express also as a rector my deep trust in the younger generation of dealing with this. And I fear that our generation, well, we've got a couple of answers, but not all of these answers, and it's up to you to find also the answers. And I believe this very strongly because I've got kids of the age of 19. My wife will kill me. 21 and 22 must be about right, huh? The age of my kids. So they're very close. Huh? They're within 3 years and a half, and they're all studying. And I see here and there a lot of criticism of the younger generation, and I don't like that at all because I feel that people are criticizing my kids, which I hate. And we've got good discussions, and when it comes to the criticisms about social media and the risks of AI and how to deal with all this, I've got discussions with my kids, and they then they often say, look, Dad, everything is interesting what you're saying, but the digital natives, it's us, it's not you. And I think we have to put more trust in the younger generations, and I think when we speak about transformations of institutions, we have to trust more. And I often ask myself, so it's not for tomorrow, but I often ask myself, what would happen if I would give the leadership of the university to students? What kind of university would you do? But suddenly you would have to decide, not just criticize, you would have to decide how to run this. I find this an interesting intellectual exercise, in fact, also for the European Investment Bank. What would the students invest in? Isn't that an interesting question? And I find it that we need to take also this positive spin on this. Social media, I think we know the risks, but social media, there have been positive things. Let's say the younger generation came together for Climate for Future thanks to social media. Movements like this and having convictions of the generation would have never expressed without this. And I believe this question of transformation, that's just something I wanted to say, transformation of our institutions and relationships, you have to take the steering wheel, but you really have to take it actively over. We will not leave it so easily, but I think it's really important. There is the art to question, and there is the art to do many things, but I think there is also the art to trust. And we need to have the art to trust the next generation. Just wanted to have said this as a rector and about the students.
Absolutely correct. I can only echo this. In my own university, the researchers and students are far more open than the older generations, not only to transformation, but also to work with social actors and not to stay in the ivory tower of university. So to be honest, the energy I have, and I think Emmanuel can confirm that, for me, comes really from the students of my university. So I didn't want to sound only sort of, prophetical and sort of catastrophic about the technology, not at all. I have trust in the next generation, but I don't have trust in US big tech, and I don't have trust in the Chinese state, right? So I think I have trust in the generations, but at one point in time, it's a question of power, right? So and I do believe that, I'm looking at you now because of course we have, climate change things ahead, issues for them quite pressing. But to my mind, the real blind spot of Europe is technology sovereignty. If we don't get sovereign in technology, this will pose huge problems in decision-making, democracy, and many others, security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I absolutely believe in the next generation, in the future generation. I'm not certain that there are benevolent people and power in the US and the Chinese. So I just give you a short glimpse of a conversation I had 2 weeks ago with a Chinese professor at the head of a huge center for technology. So it was very funny because in the phone call you had 10 click, 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 click. He said, we're just 10 people are listening us. And okay, fine. So he said, you're talking about innovation and technology, very interesting. I saw this, but I'm asking you, the US has big tech to give direction. The Chinese has the party. In Europe, what do you have? Whom do you have to give direction to what you're doing?
Values.
But the values have to be redefined.
Yes.
Exactly. So.
Mrs. Redding?
Oui, je vais monter.
No, it's Mrs. Redding. Yes, Madam.
Ah, pardon, excusez-moi. Excusez-moi.
I'm sorry.
I'm coming from a generation where university was a silo. You had the silo of physics, the silo of philosophy, the silo of mathematics, the silo of whatever. And very opaque silos, no links. You have been asking for a new renaissance, which would mean you put down the silos and you have connections. And learning mathematics and economy, learning philosophy and engineering. How to do that practically? Because the idea is wonderful, but when I look at our universities, I do not know how one can do that. And that if I look at the structure also of what you have to do to get a diploma, I do not understand how we could do it. We would need a real revolution in the university to go to this side.
So
Well,
interdisciplinarity.
This has been one of the biggest challenges of my mandate over the last year, because of course I encounter silos everywhere. The silos of faculties and centers, and it was quite an experience. And of course they justify these silos by saying, you know, I have to think about my career, and the only currency of getting the new job or the next job is by peer-reviewed article within a discipline. So already the interdisciplinarity is not paying off in the current sort of scientific system. If you think about transdisciplinarity, speaking with societal actors, I mean, just this is beyond any kind of currency. You certainly don't get the next job. But I think that this will change over the next decades, at least that's my hope, because the issues we are facing are so pressing that somehow disciplines on their own will not be able to give any answers. They can only do it together. So I think that the example of the Institute of Advanced Studies would be one example. I don't have it yet, but I think you have to get mechanisms and incentives in place where people are forced to work together.
Can I?
Yeah.
Wonderful question. And I can't resist saying something. I really believe that this interdisciplinarity and going across the topics will be extraordinarily important for the coming 10, 20, 30 years. I think there has been a time of deep trenches of understanding quantum mechanics to the very detail, and that was needed, and relativistic theory, so I'm a physicist, right? There has been a time of that, and that was important. But we need to remember that there has been a time before when people like Newton or whatever philosophers, they were looking in general into things. And then we went from generalists into people being really experts. And now we're going back into people who have a broader knowledge. What I find interesting is that the Luxembourgish schools, you can keep relatively away from a specialization to a relatively long time. So I explain myself. You can do in Luxembourg A-levels by keeping chemistry, physics, biology and math at the same time to a very large and very long extent. In most countries in Europe, that's not possible. So we are very well prepared for doing this in Luxembourg, and that's why we will set up something at the University of Luxembourg, which is much more interdisciplinary, because we can do that. I will again, give a very personal example. My girl, one of my girls, is doing biophysics in Berlin, not the University of Luxembourg. She would not go into the University of Daddy. And she's doing very well because she went with this more interdisciplinary, I'm not yet speaking about sociology, of course, but natural science interdisciplinarity into the studies, and many other German students are suffering quite a bit because they did their A-levels, let's say, in math, or in biology, or in chemistry. So there comes up the question later on is, when do we start this interdisciplinarity? And often what you describe has been pushing us to do this very lately as an academic, because we needed to do our academic career, as you said. And I think now we have to start doing it earlier, during studies, PhD, a postdoc, for not falling into the trap that you've been saying. And I believe that artificial intelligence is an absolute outstanding driver for that, because algorithms don't know if they're in the automotive sector or if they're sitting in a plane or if they're doing whatever. They just don't know. They're just an algorithm. So they're absolutely transversal. So our future life will be much more transversal, I'm very convinced of. So the advice I often give is, look around as interdisciplinary as you can, and onboard everything you can in AI, because of what you've explained about the technological sovereignty. But I believe that's the key of tomorrow, is being more transversal and not only so deep trenched as we have been in our studies.
Thank you for this comment. Mr. Yeah, you've been so patient. Thank you very much.
Luca Martinelli, Publications Office of the EU. Thank you very much for this very interesting conference, to Professor NANZ and to the Bridge Forum. I would like to focus on the adjective European in the title. And Professor NANZ already mentioned that one of the issues that we face is the reactivity. Basically, we are in a continuous reactive mode. We haven't developed yet European vision, what we really want. And Mrs. Reding already evoked also this, by quoting you, the idea of a renaissance. We know how important universities were before the Renaissance to develop European culture. I studied in Bologna. That was really, I think, a point where the European culture was formed through the circulation of students, professors. So the question is, should university today, European university, have a role also in developing what we could call European patriotism, or the concept of Europe as a community of destiny? Or is this too much?
The title of my PhD was Constitutional Patriotism Beyond the Nation State, very Habermasian. So it was about the idea of whether we can or cannot have a European public sphere, because in reality we have national public spheres. This was 25 years back. Now, I mean, we have much more fragmented public spheres and publics. It's a question between whether you sort of value more constitutional norms or the community of people, more culture or norms. So I believe that the norms themselves are empty unless you interpret them. You can only interpret them in dialogue with others. So I think it's very important to have European norms like in the treaty or elsewhere on the one hand, but it's also important to have spaces where we debate what they mean, and we see that now with European values. I mean, for many people they're empty, and democracy means something totally different in Romania than in Ireland, and freedom means something totally different in Estonia than in Portugal, and etc., 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 let alone the rest of the values of the European Union. So what we really lack is addressing these questions, and I think that the social sciences and humanities are precisely here to help forge the concepts and question these concepts, because if they become empty, we don't have a basis on which to build on in the first place. So I think that we really have to safeguard the public sphere, or in plural, the public spheres. And I think this is one of the biggest preoccupations people who are dealing with them, and I think you have done that in the past, are having, in particular in Eastern Europe, to make sure that they remain free. Because once they are no free any longer, and there's already signs of that, then we can't even have these conversations. So I do believe that this is one of the most pressing things we have to tackle.
Thank you. We have a question from Madam.
I think it's also...
Yes, thank you very much, Mrs. NANZ, for your keynote speech. I mean, we were being referred to various times as the young people here, so I have two questions. One would be what advice you would give to young people studying, for example, but also at professional training for how to develop this big picture thinking, long-term thinking that you were explaining in your keynote speech. And the other one, going in a similar direction than the last one, is, I mean, I'm speaking as a young European federalist, so there's a certain perspective, young European federalist with the federalist movement, so there's a certain perspective behind this question. But in your own opinion, can the European Union, as it is now, offer this big picture vision you were talking about? Because of how fractured you just mentioned it is, and how characterized by compromises the European politics are.
Well, these are very difficult questions. Thank you very much. The first question is quite difficult. I have a son who just did his A-level and is now thinking of what to do next. So as I can only echo my colleague, I do believe that today it's more important to be able to have clarity and to have critical thinking and to understand the world than to have specialized knowledge, right? Because in the future you have to be on top of things. To aggregate data can be done by algorithms, but to have a deeper understanding of the situation cannot. So I do believe that this is the most important point you would have to perhaps to address for yourself. So I think that system knowledge will be less important than orientation knowledge and transformation knowledge. For transformation knowledge, you need experience. It's not only a question of, getting knowledge from university. You have to interact, you have to make experience, this is a know-how, if you want to be in the business of transformation. The second question was about whether the European Union, I don't speak about vision, I would say, at least have a strategic view on the direction so that your tactical reactions of every day have any kind of direction, right? I'm not even speaking about a vision. It's lacking for many reasons. First of all, I think it's a deep crisis of leadership everywhere. Political leaders, university leaders, but also at the member states, not only a question of Brussels, right? Because it would be upon them to orchestrate this kind of thinking, and not be just technocratical reacting on single policies, Today, of course, it's very difficult because, it's a constant way of doing compromises, but this was always the case. So the question, again, if you are a leader, you go beyond just, reacting to compromises. And you could draw on scholarship, you could draw on universities if you want. But today, I see, is there Chatham House rules, or I'm not sure. So today I see the institutions more close to scholarship than even a year ago or 5 years ago. And that's very preoccupying. I see less openness, more fear in these institutions. Fear of the people who work in the bureaucracies. And there's a huge lack of leveraging on the intelligence of people. In the Commission you have hugely intelligent people. You could leverage on that. But I think this would take a bold stand. And so, and I think universities could help with this, to steer the direction in the sense of opening the space for inviting people from the political world, from the scholarly world, from the private sector, to be able to gather and to come up with a big picture and to understand where are the trade-offs and where perhaps we're not willing to go along trade-offs.
Good reflection.
And the second one was about the federalism. I do believe that it's not a question of, more or less integration or more or less federalism. I do believe we have problems with the legislation, the European legislation. It's not a question of deregulation, it's not a question of simplifying, it's a question of improving EU legislation and to be able to vertically learn from different levels, national, regional, local, so that you don't have a problem with implementation. The Green Deal is implemented only for 8%. So we have a huge problem. And it's also a question of horizontally being able to get the social actors, the industry on board. There are people in the Commission who know how to do it under the radar, but they're very, it's not a method yet. So I think we should hugely invest in the way we do legislation. It's not a question only of the digital. If you put digital on top of processes which don't work, the digital won't do anything. And I think we should address this.
Spend my career on this.
Sorry?
Process improvement. What you just said resonates with me. We have a question?
Yes.
You've been patient as well.
No problem. So thank you, Patrizia, for being here. It's so nice to see you here and to get this Habermasian spirit in Luxembourg. So my question, I would have many questions, but one that I think is particularly relevant is that we know that media are under pressure, university under pressure by populist movement that are criticizing them for being more progressist, for being more left-wing. Mm-hmm. And so how can we provide a convincing answer to this type of criticism that in a certain way reflect a sociological reality? How to convincingly give still a way to university and media? What answer would you provide to this type of criticism?
Well, I think this is the most difficult question we have to answer right now. If you look at not only the US, where you have massive right-wing intellectuals which are very strong, so it's very easy to dismiss them. You have right-wing private universities, not only by the Orban government in Brussels, but also by other governments. They are really sort of steering young people to be able to be on top of things and to be able to debate, etc., etc. And I think at one point in time, liberal universities will be attacked in Europe, in Western Europe as well, right? So the answer, I don't have the answer to give you, but I think it's part of what the sort of, how can I say, the liberal democratic societies did not think ahead. So I think in 20 years of a technocratic response, to give a quick answer, we lost thinking boldly about what are we here to defend. And it's also a question of the social sciences and humanities who didn't think about it for a long time. So I think now it's time to really forge alliances because no one has the answers. But on the authoritarian side, there are answers, and they're attracting young people, as you can see from the votes, not only in Germany, but also in other countries. So I think it's time to think about alternative futures, but not only in reaction to that, but questions of the value of what we're defending, which is not just rhetoric and keeping saying, the European values and academic freedom.
Thank you very much. It would be the last question. Thank you very, very much also for everyone here in the room to have come to this conference. I think that you, like I said earlier, you enlightened us through your speech, your first remark, but it was even more impressive with the answers, with the Q&A answers, because I think that you really showed how much you have think and delve into those topics, and that you mastering this topic very, very rich. And I think that the conversation was also fluid with the group. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Now, there's a cocktail. Yes, I can invite you to the cocktail for the second part of this very interesting conference.